Hey everyone, welcome to the Dyl Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and this is my continued coverage for New York Film Festival 62. The film festival has wrapped at this point, but I'm slowly and surely getting my reviews out to you all. I want to make sure I can really formulate my thoughts to the best of my ability before just rushing out review after review after review, especially for a film like this, which I find to be one of the most important films of the year, one of the most essential films for our time, and honestly, a towering work of cinema. And when you say towering work of cinema, it puts a lot of stakes on the viewer who goes in to watch it, because you're like, okay, I got to prepare myself because this is something revolutionary. This is something big. This is something bold. And a lot of people going into seeing this film, I had heard, said, it was good. They never really praised it at the level that I think it should be praised. But it just goes to show everyone has different ways of viewing a film, to where my expectations were not sky high. I was still looking forward to seeing this film. But then once you watch the film, or once I watched the film, I was just so taken by it. I was so blown away. It's 3 hours, but it feels like hour and a half in a good way. It feels well paced. I was so engrossed in it that when it ended, I was like, no, this is the definitive conclusion spot. It makes sense. But I'm also like, that was it. I feel like I could watch 2 more hours of this family drama because I'm so engrossed. The film in question, or in conversation, is The Seed of the Sacred Fig. I figured I should probably say the name of the title. We're a minute and a half into this review. But this is the newest entry, actually, from Germany for Best International Feature at the Oscars. And people might be saying, why Germany? Because this is a story about Iranian characters. It takes place in Iran. It is directed by an Iranian director, Mohammad Rasoulof. So people are probably wondering, why isn't this Iran's selection for the Oscars? And then when you watch this movie, you'll kind of get an understanding as to why, because this is a movie that kind of shows on full display all the atrocities going on in the political and climate and environment of Iran at the time, that has kind of been going on for almost a century at this point. Just kind of this battle between tradition and conservation, as well as progression and modernity, and trying to modernize certain trends, and especially when it comes to gender dynamics, and what women can or can't wear, and what they are kind of criticized for wearing versus for not wearing, and just the overall political climate of the time, and of the times for a while, which I will admit I was severely under researched when it comes to the Iranian government and just all of the things going on there. So I think this is a film where maybe if you are a little more tapped into it, you might not get as big a response as I did coming out of the film. But I think knowing very little, and just kind of absorbing it for the first time, and actually seeing real life documentary footage of what is going on, it was really harrowing, really frightening, and really powerful. But it also explains why this film could not be submitted as Iran's choice for the Academy Awards, because they did not approve of this film. Actually, famously, this director was arrested for essentially crimes in censorship, because Iranian government, they censor the films that are being made because they don't want this being shown, in film. So this director, Mohammad Rasoulof, and his team had to literally film everything under the radar. They had to go out in the streets kind of in secret, in hiding, and film the scenes that they needed to film, because the message they were spreading is one that is, because of censorship, not allowed to be shown in that country, which is why it is being submitted by Germany, because he had to send all of his footage that he filmed to a German editor to edit. First of all, the German editor does not speak the language in the film, does not speak Persian. So he had to kind of just go off of what he was kind of told through translation, and just kind of piece together a film. And it's a really good cut. It's a really good edit. So that just amazes me. But Germany, because it was edited in Germany, it is going to be submitted through Germany for the Academy Awards, because obviously Iran is trying to censor this film. And because they were trying to censor this film, this director was arrested and had to flee Iran into Germany, and was able to then make it to the Cannes Film Festival, and now make it to New York Film Festival. This is a crazy story. And he kind of opened up his Q&A by saying how sad he was that the rest of his team couldn't make it, because they are still being held in Iran, because they are not able to escape because of this film, because they were bold enough and wanted to spread this message so powerfully, that they were willing to do this film. But because of that came a consequence. Now that they're not able to leave the country, like, it's very harrowing to hear. And the fact that he was there in person at New York Film Fest, able to talk about the film at all, is just such a miracle. It really feels like you're watching something that goes beyond the screen. When you see him, doing these press junkets and Q&As, and kind of speaking about it, because this is a man who should be jailed for his censorship, for going against the censorship of his country. But because we should have freedom to make whatever art we want to make and spread these messages, especially if we find them to be messages that are negatively impacting our people, and I think it's just such a great lesson that, good art should never be restricted, and obviously there's some dangerous art out there. And I'm not going to ignore that. The birth of a nations, they exist, but where is the line when it comes to censorship, and why are some stories censored, especially stories that are as real and honest and occasionally as documentarian as this one? So I just think it was just such a powerful thing to see him at the screening, at the festival, having escaped all these atrocities himself, but also this like bittersweetness that the rest of the cast couldn't be there for the Q&A, and the rest of the crew, and the fact that he even needed to film anything in hiding anyway. Like, it is a difficult filming a film as is, with all the resources, with all the government approval, with the ability to go from location to location without having to hide. But then to have to hide the camera and still get some gorgeous, gorgeous imagery and gorgeous shooting and footage, it's really stunning. So I just wanted to first and foremost kind of open with that and kind of explain why it's being submitted by Germany when most people would expect it would be submitted by Iran. And then also kind of like what his approach was when filming this thing. Because the film itself is kind of that. It is putting this kind of political climate on display, this whole kind of century-long battle between, tradition versus modernity, and things that are progressing versus things that are in need of progressing, and the struggle between those who are trying to push things forward versus, keep things restrained. And you start to see that especially in the first hour, because it follows this family who is in the midst of it all. The father of the family is actually a judge. He works for the government. So you can kind of see how that kind of clashes with the daughters a bit. It's two daughters, a mother and a father. The daughters have a friend who is actually brutally mutilated in the protests at the time, and not because of her own doing. They were literally leaving from their college, and she just gets very, very badly wounded. You start to see how, like, just the tension of having a friend who is hurt by this and having to like sneak her into the house to get some medical aid from the mother, who helps to try to like pull the pieces of glass out of her face. And then you kind of see how the story then kind of condenses and becomes a little bit more personal when the father's gun goes missing. And that's kind of the extent of where I'll talk about the film's plot, because that is kind of like this turning point from Act 1 to Act 2. And as I said, this is a 3-hour film, so it happens rather late, all things considered, because in a 3-hour film, it's the first act to second act, but it's still a whole hour of film you're watching where you don't really know what the plot is. And then once the father's gun goes missing, you start to see how this kind of political unrest and paranoia of the times is now reflected within the four walls of the house, and how this father then starts to mistrust his daughters and his wife in trying to get to the truth of who took my gun, where is it, and did he misplace his gun, or did someone take it, and the repercussions if he's not able to find that gun, for what his position in the government ends up becoming if he's not able to recover that gun. And it's just a really interesting, kind of domestic thriller in a way, because you kind of have this paranoia of these four people trapped inside this house, basically kind of going in circles and circles, trying to, make sure that their name is cleared, but also kind of being accused, but then accusing others. And you kind of see how, even in a family of four, your most loving environment of people, you can still find divide, and how this political nature can kind of find its way and seep its way into the walls of our own homes, and how you're not even safe in your own home to an extent, especially if you have someone who's directly tied to the government. And it really plays in gender dynamics in a very interesting way too. The fact that this father is basically kind of essentially holding his three daughters, or his two daughters and wife, hostage because of his own personal selfishness and needs for the government. But then you also understand that if he doesn't recover this gun, there are some very, very big consequences for him in the government. But then it becomes the question of, is he loyal to the government or is he loyal to his family? Which is ultimately what this story is trying to tell. Again, painted behind this backdrop of the atrocities and political unrest of the climate of Iran. And I think it's just very fascinating because I would have been fine with 3 hours of that first act of just kind of exploring the political climate. But because the story takes such a personal pivot and kind of really condenses to just focusing on these four main characters, I feel like because the characters are so well established and well acted and well performed and well written, I just feel like it becomes that much more, stake driven, by almost condensing the scope of it. It honestly makes it feel more intimate and personal and then builds the tension because of that, because now you are so invested in these four people and you genuinely don't know what the truth is, what the lie is. It really is a thriller, and it's really unique because of the way it's structured, because it does kind of make that pivot in act two, and then act three it kind of takes a pivot into something even more extreme where it almost becomes this cat and mouse kind of, stalker thriller kind of. I don't even know how to describe it. I actually akin the last like act or last few scenes of this thing to like The Shining, where like Jack Nicholson is like kind of chasing down his family in the Overlook Hotel. Like it almost gets to that level, which is something you wouldn't expect from like the very first few minutes of this film. And that's why I really like this film, because it does progress in a very interesting way, but it is a very interesting way. It really does find ways to kind of keep you in suspense and keep you guessing and kind of still, telling a story that is engaging, but still being able to showcase the overall political message, which I think is first and foremost the most important thing. But never losing sight of that, always staying true to what he wants to say as a filmmaker and the stuff he wants to put on display while also still entertaining you at the same time. I just thought it was so good. And I know I might be rambling a bit because it's hard to talk about the film without talking about specifics, but I hope I didn't give too much away as is, because I really do think this is a film that a lot of people are going to kind of be along the ride for. And then like when that pivot happens, either be like kind of taken aback by it and not necessarily a fan of the direction it goes in, but some people like myself will be even more engaged, like, oh, this is where we're going, okay, very interesting. And I just found it so good. Like this is in contention for my best of the fest. Obviously, like leaving Honora was like the film where I was like, yep, this is the best thing I'll see all festival. But watching this, I think because my expectations were a little lower, I was just so astounded that I honestly was like, you know what, this might be the best of the fest, because I went in with the lowest expectations, not the lowest, but lower expectations, and then left it just thinking, wow, this is like one of the masterpieces of this year. Like this is a real bold, major work of cinema, especially given the context of him having to film it all in secret. And obviously for the second and third acts, if you've seen the film, it's a lot easier to film those scenes because it is mostly taking place in the houses or in these different locations. The stuff in the first act is the hardest stuff, where they're kind of walking about the streets and you have to kind of like put cameras in windows to get shots from far away because you can't necessarily go into the herd of people. And they also use a lot of like kind of almost, they look like TikTok kind of clips of like different protests, of real life protests going on at the time, to just make it feel that much more, based in reality, and that much more authentic. But yeah, like I was very just taken aback by it. I was very, very astounded by it. And I do think this could have potential to be like one of those major works that we look back on in a few years. Like maybe it gets a Criterion release and maybe it does pick up an international film Oscar. It's going to be hard because Netflix is pushing Emilia Perez so hard. But I do think in the past few years, we've seen kind of these surprise late Best Picture contenders emerge that are international films, like Drive My Car. Even a few years ago when like Cold War got a nomination for Best Director, that was a big surprise. So I would really love to see a world where Mohammad Rasoulof gets an award or gets a nomination for this, because I think the direction is the biggest asset to this film. The performances are great, the way it's filmed is great, edited is amazing, the writing, but really the fact that he's able to put his own life on the line to direct a film where these characters' lives are also on the line from different perspectives. These women's lives are on the line because they're in danger of being, absolutely tortured by men in the world, but especially men in their own family. But then this man is also, on edge because he is at risk of losing his job and being like this big, kind of traitor to the government. And I feel like that is kind of reflected through director Mohammad Rasoulof, because he is putting his own life on the line. He is putting so much risk into just making this film in the first place, but it's because he feels so passionate about needing to spread this message and make his voice known. And I love filmmaking like that. I love filmmaking that takes those bold risks, even in the risk of danger. And it really is one of the most admirable efforts I've seen all festival. Like, I'm kind of tripping over my words so much because I really don't know what else there is to say, because I can't really be critical of it, because there's really nothing that I can say like, this didn't really work for me. Like, maybe for some people it might be a little long, but even then I think the pacing is so good, especially as it kind of veers into its third act, where it really kind of picks up the action, in a very brisk way, to where I really don't know what I would fall for this. I really don't. Unless, you are of the Iranian government and you do have a problem with this story being told, then I can see how you have a problem with this film. But for most of the people listening here and most of the people viewing it, it is going to be a very eye-opening and very powerful experience. So that is my review for The Seed of the Sacred Fig. Please go check this out when it comes out for you. I believe it's being distributed by Neon, if I'm not mistaken, which is a good distributor to have, especially given the track record for Oscars the last few years. So I really hope this is a big Oscar player. I hope people check this out. I hope people have really interesting conversations after seeing it. And I hope people do appreciate the kind of plot pivot as it kind of goes into its second and third acts, and kind of how it goes from a more political kind of, biography to kind of this very centralized domestic family thriller, which I think is just so fascinating. I love this film. I really do. And it is in contention, if not my best of the fest, it's like my runner up. Like, it's this and Honora are my two favorites. And I will eventually do a ranking of all the movies I watched at New York Film Fest, but this is like top tier cinema for 2024. So I'm very excited to be able to share this with you. So thank you for watching. If you saw this film, let me know in the comments down below what you thought of it. There are more reviews coming in the next few weeks. I promise I'm going to get them out as quickly as I can. But for now, check out my past reviews: Nickel Boys, Honora, Rumors, which actually just hit theaters this weekend. It's a horror satire, so go check that out and check out my review for it, as well as many other things. Maria, Amelia Perez. All those reviews are out there for you to enjoy, including now this one. And I hope you enjoy this film when it comes out. So thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more. Please like, please subscribe. Keep us growing. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. Bye.